The marketing generates the engagement. The revenue is made in the business. The marketing does not make the revenue. And sometimes that gets lost in a doctor's, what they're envisioning in their head.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. Today's episode is the first of many that are going to feature the speakers that are speaking at my first live event called Supercharge Your Dental Practice in Delray Beach, Florida, September 29th and 30th, 2023. So as time goes on, you'll meet more of the speakers who will be speaking for 45 minutes on various marketing and business topics. Today's speaker is a good friend of mine. He was my practice marketer for about 5 years. His name is Evan Lazarus, and he's with Simple Impact Media. Thank you so much for joining me today, Evan.
Len, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Evan, let me briefly read your bio so everybody knows who you are. So Evan did not become a marketer the way most do. He went to Wall Street, started trading stocks and options, built a hedge fund, grew it to over $300 million, and then one day decided to walk away from it all. Along his journey, he has also invested in several successfully digitally charged businesses, as well as a few flops. In 2017, Evan launched Simple Impact Media as a boutique marketing and consulting firm specializing in digital marketing and practice management. Evan is widely considered a go-to source of knowledge in local search within the healthcare space and was recently named one of the top 25 people in the Philadelphia area shaping hyper-local marketing. Let's jump into the topic. Today's topic is your practice growing? So, Evan, for a brief minute or two, why don't you tell the listeners and the viewers exactly what Simple Impact Media does?
Simple Impact Media really does two primary two pillars of the business. One is what I would call traditional digital marketing. So website design, SEO, search visibility, digital advertising. Those are the main drivers of that side of the business. The other side of the business is really practice management, coaching, helping doctors, helping teams become more efficient operationally with their business so that they can effectively grow. And it amazes me that doctors believe that advertising marketing is the sole arbiter of growth. Whenever I get let's say a doctor that reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Evan, I hear good things, can we talk about my practice? I want to advertise. I want to grow my business." The first thing that I have to do is make sure that the practice is ready for it. There are so many doctors that spend millions and hundreds of millions of dollars a year at marketing when in reality, they're not ready for it. And so, you as a former practitioner probably understand this better than anybody. You have to be ready for growth. And just like what I say to a lot of doctors that I think is very relatable and understandable is, if I'm a patient in your chair, okay, let's flip it for a second. I'm now a patient in your chair. Before you can treat me, what do you have to do? You diagnose me.
You diagnose the issue.
Right. And so I have to do the same thing with the practices. And the thing that I always implore to doctor owners is, when was the last time you diagnosed your business? You have to diagnose your business. You have to understand, is my business efficient operationally? Am I achieving certain benchmarks? What is going on under the hood? It's astounding. And listen, it's not surprising. Most doctors don't, because they don't know how, or they're not given the information, or they don't know what to look at. And so, that's the reason you see a lot of, and you go on the road and you speak to thousands of people, Len, right? And so from your perspective, how many of them complain about marketing? My marketing's no good.
Every single one of them, their marketing company isn't working. They're not generating more new patients. A lot of times it's because they get in the way. Their practice is non-functional. When you look at their practice, it's run very poorly. The marketing company, they're really not tracking it properly either. So they don't really know what their marketing company is doing for them in most cases. That's what I think is the biggest problem. But, you mentioned real quick, you mentioned that, you have to diagnose a practice. It's amazing to me how many, doctors don't know simply what their overhead is, or they don't know how many new patients they have coming into their practice, and they have to check with someone else who works in the office to get that data. I knew that data extremely well when I was in practice. I watch Shark Tank. I'm a Shark Tank follower big time. And as they always say on that show, you have to know your numbers. And if you don't know your numbers, I don't think you can successfully run your business.
So that is spot on. Knowing numbers is a tough concept because there's millions of numbers. You can slice and dice what's going on in your practice probably 1,000 different ways. But let's start from sort of high level. The things that I typically will ask a doctor when we first start talking. How many new patients do you get on average in a given month? I would say 8 out of 10 doctors, they can spit that number out. No problem. From there, I then go to how many do you lose on average in a given month? Meaning how many patients have not been in the practice within 18 months for any sort of service? Right? That's considered a lost patient or an inactive patient. That's where the conversation becomes crickets because nobody ever looks at that side of the practice. It's just new patients. It's almost like a competition, right? It's an internal competition. It's new patients, new patients, new patients. I tell doctors all the time, and I'll be very candid, it's a bullshit number. It doesn't tell you anything. Because if you have 20 new patients and the next month you have 30 and then you have 35, what does that really tell you? Okay, great. You have more new patients than you did last month. But have you grown? Growth and new patients are not the same thing. They're not. They're not even close to the same thing. I had a doctor last week that I spoke to who reached out to me, and she wants more new patients, more butts in seats. And so as we went through the diagnosis process, she got about 30 new patients a month on average. That was sort of her, target number that she was hitting most months. She was losing about 50 a month out the back door. She had no idea. So her practice was contracting by 10 to 15 people a month. Her practice was getting smaller, month by month by month by month by month. And on top of it, her collections were at 87% of net production. She had no idea. So I said, you're not ready for marketing. There's too much internal inefficiency for you to go and spend money to try to do patient acquisition, which is what she called me for. I want more new patients. I want more new patients. That's not your issue. Without understanding your business, you can burn your money. You can literally take a match to it. You can flush it down the toilet. I mean, that in theory is what you're doing because the marketing company isn't going to solve that problem. If you don't collect money, you're not going to grow your practice. If you don't retain your patients or figure out what the root cause is that's causing your patients to leave at a larger rate than what comes in the front door, you're not going to grow your practice. Sure, the marketing company can get you more new patients, theoretically, but you're just going to, right now, you're going to jump your new patient numbers to be equivalent to what your back door is. Your net growth will be in terms of growing your active patient population.
Yeah, I actually also think, one of the things that doesn't take into consideration of those new patients that you received, how many actually accepted treatment, how many stayed as a patient, how many people just came in for a consultation. Because someone who just comes in for a consultation doesn't do dentistry, they're really not a new patient in my mind. They were someone who came in and then ended up leaving. They don't qualify in that new patient number, in my opinion, unless they actually do dentistry.
Once we get past the back door, the next question that I typically ask is, what is your patient lifetime value? So what is one new patient worth on average to your business? So, right. And I use the gym membership concept, right? The gyms know that, right? Planet Fitness is, I think, the one that they charge $12 a month or $10 a month. Their members last for like 3 years. 80% of them never come, right? So they know over 3 years, they're going to make X amount of dollars. And they know the average lifespan is whatever, 36 months. And so they know that if it costs them $200 to acquire a new member, that member is going to have a certain value on the other side. Dentistry is really no different. It is actually the same thing. You have to be able to understand what a patient is worth to you, how long a patient on average will last in your practice, assuming you've been around for a couple of years, right? You're not opening your doors tomorrow. Once you know that kind of information, it's a lot easier to market a business and grow a business than it is alternatively. Because you have real data to be able to support, okay, here's what I'm spending to acquire somebody, here's what they're worth to me on the other side. Now, some patients may come in and only get hygiene, right? And they're not worth that much. And some patients will come in and they'll have a root canal and they'll have an implant and right, they're worth a lot more. And in there is your average. Most practices, most general dentistry practices that are accepting PPO or in-network probably have somewhere between a $2,500 to $5,000 patient lifetime value. If you're completely fee-for-service, that number is going to scale probably higher, but your volume will be less, right, in terms of the number of patients you're going to probably treat. So it's really, really important that a doctor understands that about their business before they go and try to throw money at bringing it in. And it is astounding that when I tell you, if I were to ask that question to 10 dentists, how many do you think would know the answer?
The lifetime value of their patients? If lucky, one. Most people, zero.
Most of the time. I don't know. That's the answer. I don't know. So you want to go and spend money to try to bring patients in, but you really don't know what they're worth to you. And so what happens is when you don't have all the information, then the only thing in your mind that is success, that means the only thing that determines whether the marketing is successful is the number of new patients you get. So understanding that if you got 10 new patients this month, let's say from your marketing initiative, and 8 of them reappointed, meaning 8 of them now have their next appointment scheduled, and the value of all 8 of them, meaning the patient lifetime value is $4,000. Let's use that as our hypothetical number. So you have 8 patients that are now active patients in your practice that are worth $4,000 each. That's $32,000. Versus just saying, well, we got 10 patients. Think about, right? And let's say you spent $1,000 to acquire those 8 patients. What would you say to that?
That's great. Return on investment.
Right. Versus, let's go the other way. You spend $1,000 and all you know is you got 8 patients.
I mean, I don't think that's bad, but it's certainly not great.
In scenario 1, the response should be from a good business sense owner, wow, if I could spend $1,000 and get that kind of return, what would happen if I spend 2? How do I spend more? Right? What are we doing that's driving this until I get diminishing returns? Until the numbers just start to diminish. And so being able to have a rational, intelligent business conversation with a dentist where it's not just pigeonholed to this concept of how many new patients did we get is a totally different mindset on how to grow a business than what I typically see and hear in dentistry. Listen, there's lots of reasons, right? You don't go to business school. You spend all day seeing patients. There's a million reasons why you're not given the data, right? Most small practice owners, right, probably just have an accountant. The accountant says, well, you spend less. And so there's no understanding of how to actually grow the business. So the concept of just hiring a marketing agency and saying, well, grow my business, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You have to diagnose the business to make sure you're ready to go and invest dollars, investable money in your practice.
That's the only way that you can also see a significant return on investment on the money you're spending. Also, at that point, you'll also know what you're able to budget, because budgeting is a big problem as well, where dentists will only say, well, I only have so much money to put towards marketing. But if you are spending a certain amount of money and getting out of it a certain ROI, you can actually spend more money than you think you could. So I think there's a lot to do with all these things are connected. So how do you recommend somebody figures out or determines all of these numbers that the typical practice owner doesn't know?
It's a bit of a challenge. I think it's either a conversation with an accountant, right, to help me determine, right, what about my practice is not efficient? What's stopping me from growth? I think you got to look at some of the main KPIs, right? Your front door and your back door, your new patient reappointment rate. So if you get 10 new patients, how many of them leave with their next appointment scheduled? Right? That's a huge number, because if you get 10 new patients in the door and you're reappointing 20% of them, right? And 8 people are leaving without their next appointment, that's an issue, right? For most practices. Now, it's not all the same for all practices, right? So there are variables in all of the numbers, but it's running, like a diagnosis report. And we do that. That's how we start just about every conversation that we have, is that we have to go through sort of this diagnosis of the practice. And we have to access data from them and be able to present it to them. So it's like, look, you're ready to go and do advertising. You're ready to go and build a new website. You're ready to do all these things so that we can then go and work on patient acquisition. But it's looking at your collections, looking at your production, right? Looking at your hygiene, some of your hygiene numbers. What are you good at? What are you not as good at? Peel back the onion on the business. Most of the information lives in your practice management softwares. Run some reports.
That's why Dental Intelligence is a really powerful product. And I know you work with them to get the data out of the practice management software. It simplifies the process. One of the things I wanted to mention to you is that if you are looking to attract a higher value patient, such as full arch implants or cosmetics, you're going to have to invest more money because the value of that patient is much more. But because you're bringing more new patients into the practice, potentially at a higher value, the return on investment should be greater in a lot of cases.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I come across quite a bit is trying to get more, big cases, more implant cases in the door, more Invisalign cases in the door. It's very, very rare that a new patient's going to call up a doctor and say, yeah, I need a full quadrant, my entire mouth redone, and I want implants everywhere. Oh, it's $40,000. No problem. I'm going to pay cash. I'm going to come in tomorrow and give you a briefcase. Like, that doesn't exist.
Happened one time in my career. One time.
Right. Okay. So there you go. So the anomaly. It's not a repeatable model. I had a doctor that called me, it was 2 weeks ago, and I did a diagnosis report for her. And it turns out she wants exactly what you're saying. I want to do more implant. I want to do high-end dentistry, restorative dentistry. These are the patients that I covet. These are the patients that I want. How do I get more of these patients? And when we went through her numbers, it turns out that she's diagnosing a lot, right? A lot of these big cases are being diagnosed. But her acceptance rate, how many of those patients are actually accepting treatment, was about 12%.
Wow. That's low.
Extremely low. So I said to her, what do you think I said to her?
You said no reason to market your practice to bring more new patients in. If the case acceptance is so low, you have to work on your case acceptance skills before you try to bring in more new patients.
Right. And so what do you think her response was?
I don't want to do that. I want more new patients.
Well, it wasn't so much that I don't want to do it. It's that we're not getting the right patients. Well, no, you are getting the right patients. They're in your chair. If they're in your chair and they're being diagnosed by you, they are the right patients.
They may not be able to afford the treatment. That's a separate issue.
Well, we have to talk about the issue lies within, let's peel back that onion, right? The issue lies within how is treatment being presented? How's it being discussed? What options are being put in place to make it financially viable for people? Not everybody's going to be able to afford treatment. What options are we giving them to make it fit some sort of budgetary problems for them? So the answer isn't always just in the marketing side. And I'm very rare, because it's rare you're probably going to hear a marketing guy say, sometimes the issue isn't, most marketers are, you need more marketing, spend more money on marketing. That's not always the case. It's the operational efficiency that, from my opinion and from what I've seen from lots of practices over my time in doing this, what separates a good growing practice from a stagnant or contracting practice? The vast majority of the time, it's I'll tell you a couple things I say. The doctor's willingness to invest money in their team and train their team, right? Have you trained your administrative team on how to actually convert phone calls? Do they know how to be empathetic to patients, right? What does that conversion look like? How are we following up with patients, right? What is our ability to make care financially viable for people? I know you do a whole presentation on this, Len. You know it better than anybody else, right? How do we get patients to agree to treatment? Because if those things aren't working right, I don't care how much marketing you do. You could throw millions and millions of dollars at it. It's not going to return to your bottom line. The marketing generates the engagement. The revenue is made in the business. The marketing does not make the revenue. And sometimes that gets lost in a doctor's, what they're envisioning in their head. Whether it's they're in a big dental Facebook group and they read somebody's post and they think, I can do that too. But it really does amaze me that the differentiator is a doctor's willingness to invest in their team and train their team to be efficient, manage and monitor the progress. How do we view, right? You mentioned dental intel. That's a tool I widely use. How are we monitoring the performance of certain aspects of our business? And then how do we manage and monitor the return on, if you are investing in patient acquisition and doing marketing, how do we look at that and say, here's the return on those dollars as well? Practices that are operationally efficient grow. Period.
I think that's awesome. And I know we have a shorter time span due to some technical difficulties we had at the very beginning. So I definitely want to continue this conversation. We will do another podcast soon on similar topics, but we'll do it a little bit longer. By the way, Evan, how can someone who's listening now, how can they reach out to you and get information from you?
I think the easiest way is to shoot me an email, Evan, EVAN, @simpleimpactmedia.com.
Feel free to reach out to Evan. He does an amazing job. He'll spend some time with you, diagnosing the practice before he will even want to, spend money with him. So he gets my 2 thumbs up. But Evan will be at Supercharge Your Dental Practice September 29th and 30th in Delray Beach, Florida at the Opal Grand Resort. If you want more information about it, go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com. And as a listener of the podcast, you can save $100 on registration by entering the word reputation. Or Raving. Both codes work. Reputation or Raving both work to save you $100. Evan, like I said, we'll schedule another time soon. And thank you for joining me today. And as always, in these podcasts, remember, your reputation matters. Till the next episode, once again, thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.